It's recording.
So now it's recording.
So, yes, yes. So, good afternoon, all of you. Happy Gandhi Jayanti to all. I'm so happy that my department is conducting a webinar on Gandhi in this Gandhi Jayanti. First of all, let us remember Gandhi and his values and follow the path of truth and wisdom and pay our homage to our father of nation today. Let us sing few lines of his song in our within and dedicate him today. रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम मंगल परसन राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम मंगल परसन राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान. Now this last line of this song I think is the ultimate solution to all problems of mankind. So now I welcome you all in this afternoon and I request Dr. Rajat Kumar Kujur to introduce the guest of this webinar. Though the speaker is my teacher, yet Dr. Kujur is related to the speaker much earlier to me. And that's why I request Dr. Rajat Kumar Kujur to introduce and as well as our beloved Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Dr. Himanshu Misra, esteemed Vice Chancellor, sir, revered Professor Arun Patnaik, sir. It's an immense pleasure that the Political Science Department of Sambalpur University is hosting a seminar on the auspicious occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, that is October 2nd. And I thank all my colleagues, fellow participants who are present over here to celebrate the great momentum of Mahatma Gandhi. First of all, I must clear it that neither my Vice Chancellor nor the keynote speaker needs an introduction. Both actually have carved a place for themselves in the academic circle, which we all look forward and we try to achieve, we try to follow their footprints. Professor Sanjay Kumar Mittal, my Vice Chancellor, I am very thankful that I got this opportunity to introduce him before the August House. Professor Mittal belongs to the Administration Department. He has published a number of papers, a number of books related to the topic, and his actually his field is academic excellence, and he had served, prior to joining this university, he had served a great number of institutions in Delhi, and after joining this place, Professor Mittal has been leading all of us, has been encouraging us, has been providing us with a platform to deliver. Sir, on behalf of the Political Science Department, Sambalpur University, once again I welcome you to this webinar, sir. We are grateful to you for providing us this opportunity to conduct such type of events. Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik He is professor of political science. I have a very close connection with him because of the scholar of my guide, my PhD guide, and the last scholar of PhD guide. We both earned our PhD under the leadership of Professor Rakesh Gupta from the Center of Political Science, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Pratap is a known man, is known academician in the field of political science as well as in the field of academician. He has, he has published a number of papers, two papers, starting from all the journals listed in the UGC list. Also, he has published numerous books which are very helpful to the students across the state and outside the state. I once again welcome you, sir, to this webinar, and I am looking forward to listen from you, to take a lesson from whatever you will tell us, my fellow participants. We will take it as a lesson. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Over to Himanshu.
So thank you, Dr. Kujor. Now I invite and welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor Mittal, to inaugurate this webinar and speak few lines. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Now, sir, you are not audible. I think you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me as one of the chief guests for this webinar, which has been organized by Dr. Himanshu and well coordinated by Dr. Rajat and other colleagues from the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. And it has been rightly said that today is a great day because we have two great leaders from India, and we are trying to celebrate their birth anniversary. And that is what we talk in terms of Mahatma Gandhi ji, who was the father of the nation, who is the father of the nation, and then the Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, who was our prime minister and also a dynamic leader for this country, India. And friends, this day really is a memorial day because of the reason that India could attain this 75th year of independence just because of Mahatma Gandhi ji and because of his ideals. I think India really has come to this particular stage. He basically believed in non-violence, and because of that particular reason, friends, I think today also as country, we still believe in what non-violence and non-aggression. But then India says that we are not basically only a country which only believe in peace. If somebody is going to basically disturb our peace and integrity, then we are also going to give them a lesson. And for that particular reason, friends, today is a great day for another reason, that in 2014, India started a movement which was called as Swachh Bharat movement. And that movement was for 5 years, that completed in 2019 successfully, when India could basically create toilets and make the people not to litter around and use these toilets. And as per the case study that has been done by Harvard Business School, it has been said that India has been 98% successful. So if we go to any villages of India, we are finding now the government or some private organizations have constructed these toilets, and it's a great movement, friends. So it is a great day when we are in a position to understand the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi ji, who basically believed that if any country has to grow, if any country has to develop, they really have to believe in a clean environment. And for that particular reason, I think we as citizens of India also take oath today that we are going to keep our country clean in all respect. We will keep it clean in terms of environment. We'll keep it clean in terms of not to litter around. We will keep it clean in terms of not to go in for spreading the various waste. And for that particular reason, I think it is a great day. We also say it is a day when we are also trying to take another oath, when we want that all our citizens should be healthy. And for that particular reason, I think from 14th of August, we started what is called as Fit India movement. And this Fit India Movement 2.0 says that India now is moving towards Atam Nirbhar India. And when I say Atam Nirbhar India, it means what we are going to become self-sufficient in almost every sphere. Whether you talk in terms of weapons, whether you talk in terms of airlines, whether you talk in terms of fighter planes, you talk in terms of technology, you talk in terms of any other new thing that is going to be there in the world, I think it is not going to be, stay behind. And for that particular reason, I think when I was reading in the newspaper today, I was finding that Odisha government has also given what you can say umbrella of incentives for those organizations who are interested to produce these electrical cars and electrical vehicles. And for that particular reason, Odisha government is trying to basically woo these investors to start their industries out over here in India. And this is how exactly, friends, you take any sphere, whether it is education, whether it is technology, whether it is agriculture, whether it is anything, friends. Now I think we are in a position to bring about reforms in all sectors. And this is what we have to remember. And I think another dream of our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Modi ji, is that we want that in the year 2022, I think a few months are left to reach the year 2022, where India is definitely going to be declared as India. And for that particular reason, various types of steps were taken by the government, like Made in India, Make in India. And for that particular reason, friends, I think we really have become successful in almost all spheres. Now, I think one of the largest democracy, when we say it is India, and for that particular reason, this type of democracy has been given by our four leaders who basically has helped this country to be gain independence. And for that particular reason, I congratulate the Department of Political Science for basically organizing this webinar where we are going to exchange knowledge. And we have one very important resource person. And I think this resource person is definitely going to throw more light on how exactly India as a democratic country stands out over there in the world in order to unite the people. Because we as India, as a nation, we basically believe in harmony. We believe in peace. We believe in teamwork. We stand united. And for that particular reason, I think, although we have so many religions out over here, but I think when there is any aggression, I think all these religions combine together and we stand united. And this is the greatness of this particular country called as India. And these are all ideals of what? Of our great, the leaders who basically has helped the country to basically reach to this particular level. Now, when I went over there to America, I could see that there is a lot of development. But then I forgot, friends, that America has already completed 400 years of independence. And if we are trying to look in for this level of development in 75 years of its independence, I think what you can imagine in 400 years, India is definitely going to become a superpower. And time is not very far off when there is going to be a triad. And the triad will be what we are talking in terms of, it will be US, India, and China. And time is not very far off. India is going to overpower when we talk in terms of China, because China has used all types of means in order to reach to that particular level. But India do not believe in what unethical practices. And for that particular reason, any country who do everything ethically, I think the progress, whatever has been attained by that country, will be a sustainable progress. And this is how exactly I think that today's webinar, what is being organized by Department of Political Science and Public Administration, is definitely going to help all the participants to understand India as a democracy, as well as the role of the great leaders like Gandhi ji, who has helped India to reach to this particular level. So cleanliness, health, and the governance, these are three important things which basically can pull the nation upwards. And I think another, say, 10 years down the line, India is going to become a 5 trillion dollar economy. And if India reaches to that particular level of $5 trillion economy, I think it is going to be a great moment for all of us. And gradually we are also finding a lot of development, whether it is in terms of infrastructure, whether it is in terms of education, whether it is in terms of any sphere, friends, you take. I think India is rightly moving into the direction of globalization. If something cannot be produced in our country, we don't mind to basically import the technology. We do not mind to enter into collaborations. And this is one of the biggest advantage of any democratic country. And this is how exactly, friends, I think if we keep on moving in this particular direction, whatever targets, whatever objectives we have set for our country, I think those objectives and targets will be easily achievable by us. So with these few words, I thank the department, and I will basically look forward that whatever deliberations are being held, they are definitely going to be shared with all the participants, and there will be a lot of explosion of knowledge and adding to the existing pool of knowledge to basically add more and more. And this is how exactly I think as university, as institutions, this is the important role that we have, and we are definitely going to be successful in that type of objective. Thank you for taking me out over here. I now request Dr. Himanshu and Dr. Rajat to take this program forward and therefore listen to the resource person and help the participants to learn what more can be there for today's webinar. Thank you once again.
So thank you, sir. You actually, from in the very beginning, you enlightened us. So thank you once again. So now, so now, it's my job to, introduce the theme of this, webinar. The title of this webinar is, Gandhi Oceanic Circle and Participatory Democracy. And my teacher, Professor Patnaik, has already written this article, and this, article is, before me. So I have not to do much labor. I think I'm just reading out the abstract, and my teacher, Professor Patnaik, and he will, give his own deliberation. So I'm just reading it out. So I'm not making anything from my own. Gandhi's thought on democracy are not merely relevant to the post-colonial nations. His criticism of Western civilization for reproducing alienating self and subjugated nature is very suitable for the West. Gandhi argues for self-rule or Swaraj for East as well as West. He pleads for the reconstruction of democracy from within the self. He adopts a concept of oceanic circle, which presupposes the flow of democratic power from within and from below in ever-widening circles. It begins with the numerous primary, mostly village communities, and oceanic circles also assumes the multiple sangam of communities existing with bhaichara, that is, known as brotherhood, tradition horizontally. The concept refers to communities living in widening and horizontal relationship, not vertical, it's horizontal relationship. His idea of Swaraj is realizable through several paths, that is Antardaya, Sarvodaya, and Satyagraha, and so on. His idea of village communities is reformative, not an empirical concept. I'm sorry. Not an empirical concept. It is to be constituted by a social reformation of existing village communities to ensure the development of all. Gandhi's Satyagraha critically hinges on the methods of dialogue. Without dialogue and respect for Anekantavada, a true Satyagraha cannot be ensured. All these are different aspects of Gandhi's participatory democracy. Now, this is the abstract of that, unpublished article. and many things are there, right? So I right now invite and welcome my teacher Patnaik sir uh, to unpack the abstract, whatever I said theoretically. Right now he will unpack it before us, and there is lots of things that you can learn. And I always admire my teacher, because my teacher used to tell the unconventional truth, and hence there is a possibility of theory in Patnaik sir. And I usually search in every theoretician, but I find that if you talk with him in 1 hour, I think that 1 hour will be brilliant, and you may get multiple understanding. And I used to say that he has written an article that is critique of constitutional secularism. I think that article has the potential to produce near about 8 to 10 theses. So I think if an article can produce 8 to 10 theses, then you can imagine how much theoretical Professor Patnaik is. So I'm not admiring because he's my teacher. He is truly, and those who are the student of him in Hyderabad University, uh, they can say you know more than what I'm saying. So I'm welcoming you, sir, to our Sambalpur University in this virtual mode, and I know that you will give us a boost in this, Gandhi Jayanti, seminar, national webinar. So thank you, sir. Welcome you.
Thank you, Dr. Himanshu. At the outset, I would pleased to note that Professor Sanjay Mittal, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, gave a very nice introduction actually. Today's date, this date is very important in India's history. And I would also like place my appreciation of Dr. Rajat Kuzru for giving a very warm welcome to me. And I'm happy that many participants are my former students are sitting, and Professor Suresh Patel is also here. I'm happy to speak to all of you, share some of my small ideas. I have not worked intensely on Gandhi, but I began to realize that there are very interesting ideas in Gandhi which are not explored by people who worked on Gandhi for a long time. One is this his concept of oceanic circle and how it is connected with his thesis on democracy. People have worked on Gandhi's idea of Swaraj, Satyagraha. Although there are not many, but one or two great scholars have worked actually. Fred Dalmier has worked on democracy, on dialogue, but not much on dialogue in his essay. Subtitle is dialogue, but not much on dialogue on essay. How Satyagraha could be linked with dialogue is a very important theme. He has not answered that question. Similarly, Corona Montana has worked on his critique of Western state and hinted the oceanic circle without exploring how oceanic circle could be alternative way of organizing democracy. So Jayaprakash Narayan recognizes Gandhi's importance in oceanic circle, but then doesn't recognize that individual is a prime mover of oceanic circle. For Gandhi, he talks about only community rather than individual. Whereas, as I show you, as I will try to demonstrate, Gandhi takes a complex understanding of oceanic circle, where individual community coexist and co-mingle. So therefore, great scholars have worked. They missed out the essence of Gandhi. They captured some aspects of essence, some aspects are missed. It's important for us to understand Gandhi in its complexity in which he presents us. And therefore, let me say this brief introduction to the existing literature on Gandhi's democracy, which are all silent on the potential of Gandhi's oceanic circle, the potential of the ideas present in the concept. I will present this lecture over 5 themes. The concept of oceanic circle will be my first theme. Second theme will be is critique of Western civilization. Third thing will be is a critique of liberal democratic state or Westminster model. Fourth will be is idea of a critique of religious supremacy. And fifth, last theme of my lecture will be is critique of conflict resolution model in his concept of satyagraha. Satyagraha as a model of conflict resolution. So I will end with that theme, and these are very interesting ideas. They constitute, if you take these 4 or 5 ideas, they are interlinked with each other. They are part and parcel of his application of this concept of oceanic circle. Therefore, what does oceanic circle mean? That's the important thing for me to explain. Oceanic circle, let me quote Gandhi. Commenting on oceanic circle, Gandhi says, quote, in this structure composed of innumerable villages, there will be ever widening, never ascending circles. Mark the words. He says, ever widening, goes on expanding from individual to village to region to nation to world community to cosmic community. It goes on expanding. That's important. Individual plays a very important role here, and it begins with individual and proceeds further. This is one important. This is one, but in this ever expanding circles, there is no ascending circle. Therefore, there is no pyramid. To continue further with this quotation, life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom. There is nothing called top and bottom. There is top and bottom, but the top is not top and the bottom is not bottom. Top and bottom swipe. They move up and down. Top becomes bottom, bottom becomes top. I am explaining, but I am quoting simultaneously. To quote him further, but it will be oceanic circle whose center will be the individual. This point Jayaprakash Narayan missed. The center will be individual, not Jayaprakash. For Jayaprakash, primary community is the center for Gandhi's oceanic circle. That is not really a correct understanding of Gandhi. Gandhi argues quite clearly the center of oceanic circle will be the individual, always ready to perish for the village, later ready to perish for the circle of villages, till at last the whole becomes one life composed of individuals, never aggressive in their arrogance, but ever humble, sharing the majesty of the oceanic circle of which they are integral units. Therefore, this quotation, if you read carefully, it sums up. Gandhi says that if there is a top and bottom, bottom is top, top is bottom. Therefore, there is no fixed pyramid. There is a pyramid without pyramid. If there is a pyramid, at one time there is a pyramid, you may have maybe on top. Actually, next moment, you may have a pyramid where top becomes bottom, bottom becomes top. Therefore, this is how there is a seamless movement of units and ideas from top to bottom to top, like an ocean, how the currents flow from bottom to top and then go down. Like this, that's why Gandhi uses the term of ocean. Ocean is a metaphor of seamless movements of materials in the ocean which flow from top to bottom and then move in directions, ever widening circles, and the horizontal movement and vertical movement takes place among the material elements in the ocean. So Gandhi is using oceanic circle in that sense. He says that same thing is true for society, where we all mingle with each other, we move up and down, we move top and bottom. Therefore, we move from sideways and move in ever-widening circles. Therefore, to say that there is a fixed top and fixed bottom is to create a pyramid, a hierarchical structure, in which the top always is considered to be rational, scientific, and bottom is considered to be non-rational, non-scientific, emotional. Therefore, the task of the top is to take the bottom up. That's not the idea of oceanic circle. That's not the idea of Indian history. So Indian history, which is full of oceanic circle, deposits different ideas of community, individual, relationship. And therefore, that point is important. Therefore, Gandhi's idea of oceanic circle captures certain distinctive aspects of the relation between individual and community in India's history, which is different from Western conception of individual. In Western conceptions, you have two ideas which are present. One, the liberal idea that talks about autonomous individuals. Each individual is considered atomistic, autonomous of each other. Therefore, task of collective is to promote, collective is a vehicle to promote individual freedom. So this is a typical liberal idea. Therefore, and if there is exchange between these two, there should be free exchange between individual and the collective body, without collective mediating and regulating the individual. The individual is free from collective regulation in the Western liberal conception. That's how Locke argues. That's how most liberals argued. Then even contemporary liberals, neoliberals also hold similar view. And opposed to that, Western communitarian tradition, if you see, even where they argue that self is not autonomous individual, self is actually embodied self, where some kind of encumbered with the community, a collective body. But the notion of collective in the Western communitarian thinking is also like atomistic community. Each community is independent of each other. Therefore, you can't understand individual without connecting individual with community. But each community is independent of each other. And therefore, it is important for you to construct bridges across communities by state power, by a collective body, by a larger collective. Now, therefore, you read Robert Putnam's work. Robert Putnam argues that civil society is like a community of organizations, and state constructs bridges across these communities. So, you require not merely social capital in civil society, there's a community networks in civil society. You also need state to help these communities survive by constructing bridges. So, bridges are constructed by external agency for the Western community thinking. Therefore, the Western community thinking, community is relatively self-contained unit, independent of each other, and require only external connection between them. So, the concept of bridging social capital of Robert Putnam tries to address this concern: how when communities are independent of each other, how state or government must foster bridges across communities, so that they stay in solidarity, so that they stay in cooperation with each other, so that nation building, international community feeling can grow in civil society. Now, therefore, this idea, as I told you, essentially, if you notice carefully, this idea of atomistic notion is present here. Even in the Western communitarian thinking, I submit there is a notion of atomistic idea of a community present. In Gandhi's concept, the idea of self is quite different. Self is ever expanding unit. Self is not simply constitute of community. Self constitute of not merely community, which is immediate neighborhood. Self grows and grows and grows. Self owns cosmic community. Self owns national community. Self is incomplete without cosmic community. Self is incomplete without national community. Self is incomplete without provincial community. Self is incomplete without village community. Self is important. The idea of self it actually goes on expanding itself to incorporate various communities which are vertically higher up. Vertically. You find a pyramid kind of structure. As I said, it's a pyramid without pyramid. It's a pyramidal structure is missing, but as a pyramid is there. There is a top, but cosmic community is the top, and primary community is the bottom. But there is a two-way movement. It moves up and down. Cosmic community is integral part of our self, and individual is part of cosmic community as well. So therefore, there is a two-way movement. Top becomes bottom, bottom becomes top. So Gandhi's idea of in self is not is independent self, but not autonomous self. It is interdependent. Self is incomplete without the other. In the Western conception, self is complete in itself. The liberal conception argues that individual self is complete by itself. What is required? Felicitation, protection, guidance by state power. Similarly, the Western communitarians argue that community is an independent self-contained unit. And therefore, what is required is to construct a bridging social capital across different communities by external agency called government or state. Now, therefore, these ideas are alien to India's history according to Gandhi. Gandhi would argue that in India's context, neither self nor the local community are complete by itself. Self remains eternally incomplete in India. You cannot define self without connecting with other. Without the other, self remains incomplete in India. Therefore, and self, the varieties of self, you have individual self, you have village self, you have provincial self, you have various varieties of self. They are larger self, therefore they are not individual units, they are collective units, they are community units. But each unit is incomplete without the other. Each unit is independent, takes initiatives, takes is concerns forward, but needs help from other. Each unit has commitment to other. Each unit has rights over other. Each unit has duty towards other. Rights, as Gandhi says, rights entail duties. You can't conceive your rights without duties. Rights are embodied duties. Rights to your claims are essentially, if you are trying to claim over me, you have duty towards me. Therefore, Gandhi's idea is very complex and interesting. And in my view, Gandhi understood some aspects of India's history quite well. And he says, for example, take for example, Hindus. You can't define Hindus without connecting with non-Hindus. Today, the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat says same thing. You can't define Hindutva without connecting Hindutva with Muslimness, connecting Hindutva with Christianness. This is what Devraj said long before, and today Mohan Bhagwat says same thing. That the idea that you can't define self without connecting with the other. Therefore, there are some Hindutva elements who may try to disconnect from the other, but there are some Hindutva elements try to connect with the other, try to define Hindutva in connection with the other. You can't define Hindutva without connecting with the other. You can't define Hindu for Gandhi without connecting with non-Hindus, without defining individual, without connecting with the other, the village with district with province with national community with global community with cosmic community. Even the international community is not so international, not so concerned with nature. Therefore, it is important for you to understand the cosmic community, which includes nature as well. Therefore, the Gandhi's idea of self is ever expanding, and each self remains incomplete, whether individual self or collective self. Each remains incomplete by itself. Each is independent, and each is connected with other, therefore interdependent. Therefore, the independent and interdependent self is what Gandhi argued. Each self constitutes the other. Without the other, no self is complete. No self can ever be complete. I will tell you later. But point is, every self must go on expanding itself in order to realize its goals, its capacities, and it must stay in networking with the rest of the world outside the world. That's very brilliant. That's brilliant said by Gandhi. Therefore, Gandhi argues quite clearly that it is important for you to even bring cosmic community that involves nature and God into a conception of self. Gandhi was not atheist, so he brought God into picture here. But even if I atheist, one may sympathize with Gandhi. I am atheist, but I do sympathize with Gandhi. I understand people believe in God. Therefore, I go with their sentiment of respect God. Therefore, I think they would understand Gandhi a lot better than me. But the point is that whether atheist or theist, it is important to know that there is a cosmic unity called community called nature. atheists, it is important that nature is important. Maybe they may not believe in supra nature, fine, but there is the international community is not enough. There is a community outside the international community called nature that should be brought into picture. Therefore, Gandhi's contribution to a theistic understanding of this project still remains significant and valid in my view. So, this having said that, what is important for us to understand that this is how this oceanic circle must be applied to all these subsequent themes which I told you earlier. Take, for example, is critique of Western civilization, which I already hinted you. I will not tell you in great detail. Basically, he said that the Western civilization is deeply problematic. It worships technology. It treats it worships technology so much so that it has forgotten self, forgotten nature. It has done immense damage to self development. It has produced alienating self. It has become technologically supremacist society, and he's critiquing Western civilization, industrial civilization essentially, and worshipping technology has become big. Technological fetishism has come into big play in Western societies, and it has undermined the individual independence and also independence of nature. It has used individual instrument and it used nature as instrument. And Gandhi uses metaphor. He says technology is like upas tree. UPAS, upas. Upas tree is like a tree that sucks water and grows at the cost of other trees, because once water is sucked around the area, catchment area, no other thing can grow. So upas tree destroys trees around. You grow upas tree, it destroys trees around. So Gandhi uses metaphor. Technology is like that. Technology, you build technology, destroys self around. The color self that uses technology becomes prisoner of it. If you remember modern times of Charles, this filmmaker, I forget, comedian. He depicts quite beautifully how the people who use modern technology become cogs in the machine, the labor process. And I forget the comedian's name. Anyway, so it's important for you to understand that modern technology sucks energies for human life. So in modern technology, it reduces nature as instrument, because modern technology is essentially profit seeking. It promotes profit seeking, profit motive, and it promotes aggrandizement of wealth. As a result, nature is reduced as a resource process. Nature is seen as an instrument for further human achievement, human civilization. The result, it has deeply denuded nature, and today, see, it has created a havoc across the world in the form of coronavirus in 2019. It has created havoc, and it's today the COVID-19 is outcome of this human aggression, aggressive intervention, domain of nature. No matter what natural resources use, you go on using until they are available, and it has produced a backlash in the form of nature crying over our shoulders. Therefore, so many elements of nature are today crying, and they are creating a headache for all of us. You see, tsunami is an outcome of it. You see, acid rain is outcome of this process of development. You find ozone layer, the depletion of ozone layer is outcome of this development, and varieties of consequences happened, and they are fatal. Today, it has produced a gigantic pandemic time for all of us, and the entire world community is beset with this headache. Therefore, we are deadly scared of our survival. Therefore, the Gandhi was essentially anticipating this. Now, today we are gasping for oxygen. Otherwise, we may perish anytime. And situation has become so bizarre across the world. It's very important for us to understand that we must respect nature as a person. He borrowed these ideas from Tolstoy, Rousseau, and many critics of capitalism, and argued that it's important for you to respect nature and use natural resources to the extent it is useful for you. He says nature provides resources for your need, not for your greed. That's a famous statement made by Gandhi. Therefore, try to satisfy your need, try to satisfy multiplication of need. Don't try to convert need into greed and extract things from nature and destroy nature in the process, so that you don't leave anything for the next generation. Today we may create intergenerational injustice. Our next generation may be crying for natural resources which may be depleted by our generation. So Gandhi hinted most of these problems. He anticipated deeper crises. Therefore, he says the Western civilization, a technological-driven civilization, which is self-alienating on one hand and alienating nature on the other, using individual instrument and nature as instrument, reduces individual as a cog in the machine, reduces nature and destroys nature, is not worth living. Time has come for us to rethink, debate, and come out of it. And Western civilization has positive things. Gandhi was not, many people think Gandhi is anti-technology. He is not. He says technology, I demand technology for justice. I am opposed to technology as upastri. So technology as justice, technology with justice is what I want. That means he was in favor of many innovative technologies. He was in favor of telephone, locomotives, electricity, and he said quite clearly that these things could not be produced without large-scale industrialization. We need them, but question is you must use these technologies for your need satisfaction, not for your greed, not for money, not for profit, not for aggrandizing your wealth. So it is important for you to understand. Therefore, he remained firmly critical of Western civilization. And in my view, today most of the Western thinkers own these ideas. The ideas actually have come from Rousseau, Tolstoy. They are Western thinkers. And today, many Western thinkers have gone back to Gandhi in a big way. They find Gandhi extending the ideas to contemporary period. Gandhi has written on oxygen. There's a very interesting essay on oxygen he has written, how shortage of oxygen may be created by civilization. He makes a point. And one of my friends, Satya Sahu, has written on essay on Gandhi, oxygen, and COVID-19. That's an interesting essay he has written. Now, there are a lot of interesting things Gandhi anticipates in his critique of Western civilization. Some of them are deeply relevant for us today, especially COVID-19 has made us more conscious of respect for nature, deep respect for nature required by us. We are yet to wake up to live up to that expectation, despite having COVID-19. But I think today it is easy for us to convince each other to respect nature, to not to use nature excessively, so that you produce such viruses across the world. And once you produce virus in one region, this virus can spread to many regions and capacity to multiply. And I hope we will be able to manage to escape third wave. So third wave of COVID-19. So that threat is looming, and therefore it is important for us to remember Gandhi. Second important theme of Gandhi is critique of liberal state. Liberal democratic state, they argue that again based on individual, autonomous individual, independent individual, but autonomous individual, atomistic individual, and individual is a voter and is busy in pursuing economic interests, and essentially liberal democratic state based on market principle, market produces exchange of goods by private owners, free the state should not exercise any control over them, and nature is like a resource for private agents in modern economy. So liberal democratic state has made individuals as voters essentially. We just like market, you exchange commodities, you exchange votes, and give a consent to state, and state looks to democratic state because it is the governing elite of the state is voted to power based on consent of people. That's what social contract theory argued. That's what even practitioners of liberal democratic state argue over a period of time. And Gandhi was deeply disturbed by this model. Gandhi said that the idea of democracy is not simply electoral democracy. It should be linked with the spiritual domain as well. So by simply casting your vote to form a government, we cannot say that you are democratic, because society must be democratic. and not merely democratic state, society must be democratic, and people must know how to govern themselves. So the idea of democracy based on election is the idea of self-government. That's not the idea of self-rule. Self-rule means you must rule yourself by yourself. Gandhi's famous statement, self-rule basically means rule of self by self, not self-government. So democratic, electoral democracy is considered self-government. Government is based on voting calculations. Now, in the process of this, the individual is actually denuded. You have a individual who is essentially a voting machine, and then the once is voted, the government comes in power. Government goes on doing things contrary to the consent given by individuals. Therefore, you find a large number of anomalies taking place. The individuals desire for a government and government doing things for individuals. Find a lot of contradictions between here. Therefore, Gandhi was deeply uneasy in supporting a liberal democratic state, primarily because it was based on the idea of individual vote, a concept of individualism, and the concept of free market. As a result of this, Gandhi argues that the philosophy of individualism and market principles, profit making, and also destruction of nature continue to thrive in democratic governments. That's an interesting paradox in democracy, where you have a democratic government where you talk about all these things without able to do it anything. Therefore, this you are creating contradiction in democracy. If you don't resolve these contradictions, society democratic commitment will deplete. Many complexities in this framework, but I will tell you one concept. Bhikkhu Parekh argues that Gandhi imagines a Swaraj polity as democratic counterpoint to liberal democratic state. The idea of Swaraj polity is very interesting idea. Actually, it is a concept developed by Bhikkhu Parekh to examine Gandhi's criticism of liberal state. Bhikkhu Parekh argues that Gandhi imagines Swaraj polity. What does Swaraj polity means? In my view, Parekh is not doing it, but I extend this idea. My view, Swaraj polity for Gandhi is based on his idea of oceanic circle. And what is that circle? It moves from each person. The Swaraj polity moves from each person to primary village community, to district community, to regional community, to national community, to world community, to cosmic community, which includes nature. So ultimately, the world community is integrated with the cosmic order of nature and paradise, nature and heaven. In case of atheists, you may drop paradise, fine, but you can't give up heaven. You can't give up nature. Therefore, Gandhi's project is relevant for even atheistic people. So unlike modern liberal state, both self and nature are in synergy with Swaraj polity. In both liberal democratic state is highly centralized with heartless bureaucracy. Decentralized process actually flows from above. Even if suppose state believes in decentralized system, the idea of decentralization emanates from above, not from below. Not from below to top and back. So Gandhi argues for a decentralized polity based on a flow of activities from below to higher units and back. And this is what Gandhi calls actually Loka Shakti, people's power. Jayaprakash Narayan calls this actually Lokaniti. In Jayaprakash, the idea of village community is important, but he forgets that for Gandhi, individual is equally important. Individual precedes village for Gandhi. I give I give an example of Gandhi's notion of scripture. He says why for Gandhi individual is the center of oceanic circle. It may be helpful to recall Gandhi at length here. I will quote Gandhi. To quote him, I hold that self-government is not an end, but only a means to good government. And true democracy is that promotes the welfare of the people. The test of a good government lies in the largest good of people with minimum control. The test of autocracy, socialism, capitalism, etc., is also welfare, also people's welfare or good government. I say the test of autocracy I particularly stress this idea. Test of autocracy is people's welfare and good government. And that is also applicable to socialism and capitalism. In themselves, however, they are of no value. In themselves, they are of no value. Any system of government can fail if people don't have honesty and feeling of brotherhood. There may be work, there may be men to do the work and tools with which they do. Yet, in my view, system that admits poverty and unemployment is not fit to survive even for per day. So, if you see, I give an example. There's an interesting film, Swadesh, made by the famous filmmaker Ashutosh Gaurikar. In 2004, film came where the superstar Shahrukh Khan is a hero. And the film depicts realities of Lok Shakti, or what Jayaprakash calls Lok Niti. It's a film where actually is based on a real life story. Is made into film. Real life story based in the Sangli district of Maharashtra, and made into a film by Ashutosh Gaurikar. And in that film, if you see carefully, if you remember that film, you will see how villagers are mobilized by this the hero and then the heroine and few other leaders, the village, the school teacher, and so on and so forth. They mobilize villagers to participate in constructing a micro hydel power project. Villagers resist the idea initially, mooted by teacher and engineer, because they thought that why untouchable should participate in development process. That would benefit them. So the upper caste fought this egalitarian view to let everybody participate in the village, including untouchables. And they ridiculed the idea. But finally they realized that if they contribute to labor, they should benefit from the development process. That's Gandhi's important point. If there is a development process where people contribute labor, they must benefit out of it. The last mile person must benefit. The Antyodaya must happen. So this idea was invoked by the local community in Sangli, and then there is a lot of contestation taking place, but gradually everybody comes around, and then the sacrifice of untouchability by the upper caste, Sramadan of the lower caste, the primary communities formed. The mutual give and take place here, and both the Dalits and the non-Dalit communities come together. They construct a micro hydel project by using the hill near the forest. By using the water flowing across the hill, they built a micro hydel project, and they supplied electricity to the entire village. And now in the process, when the project was built, there was an interesting debate whether because Dalits wanted to participate in the education system there, and the teacher was willing and others were willing, but the upper caste resisted. So then when the need for this electricity came, they required their labor. Then these mediators put a condition: if you need their labor for building electricity project, you must let them participate, the children participate in the education system. Then that led to a tension between these groups. Finally, they realized that if they don't participate in doing work, then who will build this electricity project? So therefore, let them join education as well. That's how this compromise was struck. The persistent efforts were made through dialogue, fierce debate, discussions. The brilliant songs in this particular theme when the project, the dialogue takes place. So that's how this New Swaraj was founded in the village, where development took place for the well-being of all, irrespective of caste differences. Irrespective of it happened through dialogue, discussion. The resistance was neutralized. So through passive resistance, the egalitarian society was created in a small way, and it really happened in certain villages in Sangli district. Film is made from it, and if you have not seen this film, I advise you to see this film. It's a remarkable vindication of Gandhi's idea of oceanic circle emerging from local community to begin with. So therefore, Gandhi argued that if this is how individuals must enlarge themselves, must stay connected with private community. Private community must stay connected with larger communities across the nation, across the world. That's how this participated democracy must evolve from below, and it should be transformative. It should enable people to participate. It should be concerned with Sarvodaya, and that means development of all, not simply development of the elites or upper caste of village community. It should address each individual upper caste, each individual, their concerns. So Dalit children should not contribute labor; they should go to education, and whereas Dalit adults may contribute labor and participate in development project. Then benefit out of it for children's education. They must benefit electricity for children's education. Therefore, what you find is a complexity here, and therefore many people think that Gandhi is pro-caste. Gandhi is that is not true. Gandhi's idea is interesting. He basically he believes in passive resistance to powerful people, and in the context of colonial struggle, he extended the idea to the British power. But in the post-independence period, he could have probably extended the idea to the elites of India. Because for Gandhi, he said the self-government is actually like replacing the white tiger by black tiger. You can't replace white tiger by black tiger. Tiger is tiger. Black or white is immaterial. Tiger will always swallow you. Tiger always devour you. It's important for you to realize that self-rule is not self-government. Self-rule basically means rule of self by self. As the film Swades vindicates, here your people are trying to take charge of things. They are trying to access education on their own. They are trying to build an electricity project for themselves, independent of state control. Therefore, this is how resources are available in the village must be utilized by everybody for everybody else. And people may, if they don't do it, don't have Swaraj. Real Swaraj lies in self-rule rather than voting for elected government of your own. Then you are actually producing black tigers. Black tigers are tigers nevertheless, though their color is different, but they're tigers. Therefore, they will finish us. They will ruin democracy. Ultimately, democracy will ruin democracy. Today, Western democracy, Indian democracy has weakened our commitment to nature, our commitment to individual self. So it's important for us to renovate these ideas, expand these ideas further. Gandhi's ideas are very relevant even for our modern times. The third point is critique of religious supremacy. How much time I have, Himanshu?
Sir, I think you may speak
Another 10,
in a
10 minutes,
15,
sir?
15 minutes, sir.
15, okay, fine. Two more points I have to say. Critique of religious supremacy. This Gandhi's point is very interesting. See, Gandhi realized that India is a multi-religious society. It's not unlike Europe. India is a multi-religious society. You have many religious communities in India. European system is essentially dominated by one religious community with many large sects. Therefore, there the problem is of a different kind. There the problem is between religion and state. In India, Indian context, not merely a problem with religion and state. There's a problem also between religion and religion. So Gandhi's contribution here is very, very enlightening and very relevant. Gandhi said this is the idea of Swaraj. Swaraj idea is actually linked to democracy, and India cannot be democratic if we cannot practice inter-religious harmony. Inter-religious harmony is so critical for our democracy. You can't think of democratic India, democratic society in India, when communities of different religious communities hate each other. You can't think of this. Therefore, the problem today is this. Therefore, it's important for us to stay with Gandhi's idea here for some time. Gandhi makes an interesting idea. Gandhi says that as early Christians came to India, they carried aggressive campaign for conversion. If you read his autobiography, Experiment Truth, he says clearly that they denounced Hindu idol worshipping practices. They said, you join Christianity, you embrace Jesus, you come to Jesus' path, Jesus will take you to heaven. So they promise a new paradise. They try to replace the idea of paradise practiced by Hindus for a long, long time. And built on that, Gandhi argues years down the line. He says, what is important for Indians to understand that no religion must be allowed to dominate another religion. No religion should try to exhibit supremacy, high-handedness, or egoistic tendencies. That I am better than you, and I am best than you, and you are the worst, I am better. If you try to exhibit these supremacist tendencies, you will produce violence, you will produce hatredness, you will produce division in society, you will produce partition walls among religious communities. Oceanic circle will be broken by a tendency to aggressively campaign to convert people. So Gandhi therefore said that Gandhi said important for us to notice there are three tendencies growing in India. Among Hindus, the tendency to do Shuddhi. Shuddhikaran, try to purify people who are converted. Or what secular intellectuals call reconversion. Gandhi calls it Shuddhi. And among Christians, the tendency to convert everybody who is not Christian. And Muslims, there is a tendency to convert to Tabligh, practice Tabligh, convert all the non-Muslims. Therefore, in this process, if religious communities try to, the underlying assumption behind conversion, Shuddhi and Tabligh is this. Other religions are impure, our religions are pure. Therefore, impure fellows should be converted into pure communities. Each religious community portrays itself as pure. Other religious communities are portrayed as impure. Therefore, this tendency is to convert each other. Now, Gandhi says, this is actually bigotry. This is destructive of inter-religious harmony. It is important for us to understand that the supremacist tendencies are contained by state, by our own efforts. Therefore, he was not the one who relied on state to do everything. He clearly argued that if oceanic circle of religious communities coexist, a metaphor used by Maulana Azad, Sangam communities exist in India. Maulana Azad uses this concept to say that if you look at Indian society is a society of Sangam communities. There is one Sangam, main Sangam, but there are many more Sangams. There are Sangam Sthalis in India, Sangams across India, not just one Sangam place in Allahabad. There are many Allahabas across India. You find Sangam in Balasore, you find Sangam in Rayalaseema, you find Sangam in Belur, find Sangam in villages of Goa. Therefore, the varieties of Sangam you find across India. You find Dargah cultures across India where religious communities mingle with each other without feeling threat from each other. Therefore, it is important for you to learn lessons of religious toleration, lessons for the inter-religious communities, inter-religious institutions were built over historical period, and notice those ethos and learn from them. One lesson you learn from them is that do not try to exhibit that you are better than others. Do not try to dominate others ideologically. Once you try to dominate others ideologically, there will be political repercussions. You may be non-violent, you may be peacefully doing it, but you are not doing well. You may be non-violent. It doesn't mean that the other side will not be violent. Once you are trying to impose cultural supremacy of one kind or other, the other side will be politically violent. They will be reacting very aggressively. And as a result of this, you will find a lot of schism, a lot of divisions, a lot of hatredness, a lot of partitions. Therefore, oceanic circle will be broken. Interdependency will be broken. And cultural get-togetherness that is witnessed across Dargah cultures, across Sangam communities will be broken. It is important for you to learn lessons from that to counter the supremacists. So the Gandhi therefore offers a powerful critique of religious supremacy, and nowhere else I find this cited by our secular intellectuals. Secular intellectuals are scared of even citing Gandhi, sadly so. They remember Gandhi for other things, not for his critique of religious supremacy or cultural supremacy. But some of them apply only to Hindu supremacy, not to supremacy exerted Christians or Muslims over others, not just about Hindus. Therefore, Gandhi argued that it is important for us to be fearless. You must speak truth fearlessly. I have witnessed this in Kandamal. I will not able to examine that detail. We can discuss the question answer. Last point I will tell you about Satyagraha as a model of conflict resolution. Satyagraha actually has many points, but one point I would like to tell you is this. There are 5 aspects of Satyagraha. Satyagraha is based, the idea of Satyagraha is based on a idea of truth. Satya Agraha, interest in truth. Agraha means interest and Satya is truth. So interest in truth. What is truth? Gandhi says truth has many sides. Gandhi was essentially a Jain thinker. He borrowed the idea from Jain philosophy and argued that Jains believed in Anakantabad. I also subscribe to Anakantabad. Anakantabad basically means there are many aspects of truth. You know one aspect, I know one, he knows another, she knows one more. We know, or you may be knowing 2 more, I may be knowing 3 more, somebody else may be knowing 4 more. But what is this? There are many varieties of aspects of truth. Therefore, it is important for you to respect each other's knowledge. Anakantabad believes that you may be holding tail of the elephant, I may be holding the leg of the elephant, and Himanshu may be holding the trunk of the elephant, and somebody else will be holding something else. Somebody may be touching the body and saying it's a white body. He may be blind, 7 blind men, you wrote this story of 7 blind men. Jains constructed a positive story. Generally, that is constructed negatively by average people. But Jains had a positive story. So the blind man and one elephant, 7 blind, one man indicates one thing. Each blind man appreciates one aspect of truth. So similarly, in real society, those who are having, those who are not physically challenged, have blindness. Blindness is with all of us. We cannot grasp the entire society. We can't grasp the entire aspects of truth. At any point of time, we will only master some aspects of truth. Therefore, Anakantabad. Anakantabad. Doctrine of many truths. That's important. Therefore, it is important for you to. Gandhi says that if you see this, any conflict situation, you are going to face this situation. Truth is not a monopoly of one side, and the other side is not completely wrong. Therefore, because generally in conflict situation, we tend to think that, oh, this side is right, that side is wrong. That's not true. It is possible that one side is more than might have committed more mistakes, but yet each side has some aspects of truth. One side having little aspects of truth, one side may have more aspects of truth, but each side has many aspects of truth. Therefore, important to understand that truth is not private property of one element in conflict against another element. Therefore, you can't say the other side is entirely false and one side is entirely true. Therefore, that is Gandhi's take, interesting take. So Gandhi says, first recognize that truthfulness, untruth elements are in each side. What is true and what is untrue in each side. That is the first take on conflict, deriving from Jain philosophy of Anakantabad. Second principle of Satyagraha is this: put truth elements from each side together. Take truths from, suppose there are 3 groups who are fighting with each other. Take truth elements from ABC and isolate untruth elements from ABC. Take truth from ABC and then put them together. That is second stage. Third stage is to do from a narrow side, adapt it while struggling with your own opponent. Form a small side, form a narrow side, adapt it while confronting with your opponent. Fourth, when you are forming a narrow side, since you have accepted elements of truth from each side of the combating parties, Therefore, even when you are confronting the opponent, when you are struggling with the opponent, realizes that you have already respected some aspects of truth in him or her. Therefore, therefore, struggle between opponent and you will be less intense. It will not be deeply polarized. That's an important point in Satyagraha. The third point. Fourth point is revise the new position. That new position you have adopted. You have adopted different aspects of truth. You have tried to synthesize them, but don't think that is complete. Therefore, be open to revise that position, because as you are dealing with your opponent, you may discover new elements of truth. Therefore, the Anakant Bhatt story continues. Therefore, the truth that you have commanded in the beginning, at the third stage, must get enlarged through dialogue with opponent at the fourth stage as well. Therefore, but end the struggle only when both the sides or three sides of contest agree to occupy the same side. When they agree to reconcile, then end the struggle. But never think that you have commanded truth. That's important principle in Jain philosophy. Doctrine of Anakant Bhatt indicates that at any point of time, the whole society, all of us, the whole entire humanity will not command truth. Forget groups, forget communities. Even the entire world humanity will not understand truth. Today we are struggling with the genesis of COVID-19. Today entire humanity is struggling. Scientific data, therefore the struggle will continue. We will face another COVID 2023. You never know. You may face another powerful virus 5 years down the line. Never know about it. Be prepared to face truth, unpleasant truth. Satyagraha believes in speaking about unpleasant truth. Don't try to sugarcoat truth. Don't try to say that truth is pleasant. Truth is pleasant. Truth can be very harsh sometimes. It's important for you to understand that truth can be unpleasant to speak. Many secular intellectuals are not able to say that Christians are responsible for conversion in Kandhamal. Not many. Not many are there in India who will say that in Kandhamal, one reason why conflict took place because of supremacy tendencies showed by the new church, Pentecostal churches in Kandhamal districts. All India Christian, I had a fight with All India Christian Council. I had a very fierce debate with them. I told them, look, your Christian fathers are telling me, what do you mean? Catholic priests have told me that Pentecostal churches are even poaching their devotees and tribes, non-Christian tribes and non-Christian Dalits. So don't tell me all this. But All India Christian Council has taken a different viewpoint. They are only blaming Hindu supremacy tendencies. But they forgot that the Pentecostal churches also exhibited. I'm not blaming the old churches, but Pentecostal churches are blaming, are also to be blamed, because they try to aggressively campaign to convert the animistic and naturalistic tribes to the path of Christianity. That actually created a lot of tension. They said, we'll wipe out your worshipping of trees, worshipping of stones, worshipping of animals. We don't wipe out this. These are all contemptuous activities you are doing. Come to Jesus Christ. Jesus will take you to paradise. Now, when you construct this new paradise aggressively, you are trying to invite wrath of people. People protest, people revolt. And you have the political force joining them, you find communal conflict taking place across the district. That's what happened in Kandhamal 2007, 2008. But how many, apart from All India Christian Council, which is silent on this, tell me how many secular intellectuals have at least partly blamed new Pentecostal churches for aggravating religious tensions in Kandhamal districts? Not many. Except one or two, and I am one of them. So but the problem is this. Problem is you are not able to speak unpleasant truth. And many of them know. The Catholic priests know this. But they are not able to say it openly. They told us in private, but they can't come out openly in there and tell their bishops, tell their heads, All India Christian Council, that this is a problem here in the district. Try to reduce tensions. Therefore, trying to blame only one side, not others, is not Satyagraha. Satyagraha believes in speaking truth, unpleasant truth, even if it means cost your life. Gandhi was unafraid of speaking truth. He believed in speaking truth without fear and favor. If truth is not spoken without fear and favor, then you are not speaking truth. You are diluting or presenting sugar-coated truth. You are only speaking truth to your constituency. But then who will transform your own constituency from its untruthful activities? Satyagraha. Gandhi can only do it. So I will end my lecture here. So thank you very much. I presented a brief of my paper. In course of discussion, I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation, and this presentation is very much straightforward. And I can remember while presenting a talk on the relation between the Gramsci and Gandhi, I found many resemblance, many similarity, and I was very much impressed on Gandhi, on his concept of truth, and he's saying that in normal situation, people speak truth and claim that they are truthful person. But what Gandhi, meant about the truth is that in an abnormal situation, in a negative situation, a truthful person or a person who is truthful must speak the truth. And generally, in a negative situation, we lie, and in a normal situation, we speak truth. However, you should not claim as a truthful person, because in a negative situation, you are not speaking. I can remember. So, thank you. And I have, some questions in my chat box. Samir, our PhD student, he has asked, I have summarized question. The question is all about, Gandhi never viewed modernity favorably, and he was more concerned with primitive society and cottage industry. If it is so, then how Gandhi view is still important in the context of cosmopolitan global village? This is the first question. And the second question, why there is no realistic teaching about Gandhi today? So I think, sir, we will take questions and you will respond. Then after you respond, then I will ask questions further. Right. So please, sir. No, you are not audible. I think you have to unmute yourself.
Now tell me the question. I was reading chat, but I forgot to
The
attend.
question is that Gandhi never viewed modernity favorably. He was more concerned with primitive society and cottage industry. If it is so, then how Gandhi view is still important in the context of cosmopolitan global village? That is the first question asked by Samit. And the second question is that why there is no realistic teaching about Gandhi today?
No, realistic.
No realistic teaching about Gandhi today. Sir, I think since you are writing
Okay.
question,
I got it, point. Yeah.
okay, since you are writing the question, let me ask those questions asked by participant. And the
Okay.
question asked by Sasmita is that this bottom to top, this method, is this possible in every country? Bottom to top, this method, is it possible in every country? And the second question she has asked, they explain Gandhiji's notion of decentralized political system. Right? And the third question that has been asked by my friend and junior Dr. Rajiv Lochan Behra. He is teaching philosophy in Banaras Hindu University. He has written much, and I will ask him to directly talk to you on this platform. But the question, what he has asked, that is Gandhiji's self is universal, or it is interrelated? That is Rajiv's question. And the questions that has been asked by Brundavan is that how to connect the Gandhian participatory democracy with modern mobocracy. How to connect the Gandhian participatory democracy with modern mobocracy. The second question of Vrindavan is that how to harmonize today's materialistic democracy with Gandhian spiritualistic democracy. Right? And there is another question. No, I think it's not a question. So now it's over to you.
Let me answer.
Yeah.
Let me answer. Quite a few complex questions. First, Samir's question. Gandhi was not anti-modern. He was. I told you he was for large-scale industrialization, which is enabling people, which does justice, just takes care of the needs. For example, he was for locomotives. He was for telephone. I told you that he was for communication technology. Communication technologies cannot be produced without large-scale industrialization. Therefore, he was for modernity of different kind. He was not for modernity which is self-obsessed with profit making. Therefore, produce technology for sake of profit. He was for technology, modern technology, for fulfillment of human need, not human greed. But that project remains a critic of because today industrialization is or modernity is essentially based on greed. And the greed has gone to such an extent. Now we are simply destroying nature's existence. And today you are having a COVID pandemic time. The world never witnessed this situation. That's because of excess extraction of natural resources. Therefore, it has produced a powerful virus which is trying to destroy humanity. And it is going to stay with us, and many of our generations will die. Definitely, at least some percentage of the population will perish despite having vaccinations. And we have to go on having series of vaccinations in order to survive itself. The vaccination we have taken will only be valid for 9 months at best. After 9 months, we have to go for another round of vaccinations. And during that period, you have to be cautious and careful. So therefore, this crisis for civilization we have produced because of a technology-driven, greed-driven technological activity we have pursued throughout our history. Despite people warning from periodically, from period to period, many scholars have warned, many activists have warned. Rousseau has warned, Tolstoy has warned, Gandhi has warned. So the important lesson for us to learn from these critics. So in my view, unlike Rousseau and Tolstoy, Gandhi was not anti-modern. He was deeply modern. He was argued that scriptures must be understood by applying human reason. You can't simply multi-religious society. You can't say that only Vedas are right and Quran is wrong and Bible is absolutely wrong. You can't say it. Ours is a multi-religious society. You must apply reason where aspects of Bible may not be practiced by us, aspects of Veda may not be relevant for us, aspects of Quran may not be practiced by us. We should have courage to say these aspects are not relevant for ourselves. These aspects are deeply relevant for ourselves. Therefore, Gandhi was a worshipper of reason, which is an essential engine of modernity. Without reason, you don't have modernity, you don't have modern society. So Gandhi was for technology, for justice. Gandhi was for reason, for justice. Gandhi was reason for participated for people-enabled, people-friendly democracy, which is again a modern project. C.V. Macpherson has taken this project. Many people have talked about participatory democracy, drawing inspiration of Gandhi. Who says Gandhi is not modern? There are powerful modern thinkers who owe their debt to Mahatma Gandhi for arguing for participatory democracy from below. Therefore, it will be unrealistic to dismiss Gandhi as a primitive thinker. The ideas are primitive and they're not German to modern societies. That will be very unrealistic, and in my view, it will be a dismissal attitude towards Gandhi, and that will be at our own cost. Quite surely, it is at our own cost. It is important for us to see what is positive in Gandhi. See, there are many more negative things in maybe Gandhi. His critique of caste was very weak. Ambedkar has a point there. So similarly, Dalit views of Gandhi and socialist views of Gandhi may be weak, may be fairly valid. I'm not going to that, but I'm saying don't dismiss Gandhi because Dalit critique is right, or don't dismiss Gandhi because socialist critique is right. The strength in Gandhi, you must no theory is adequate way. Gandhi says no theory captures truth. Now, Gandhi's theory captures some aspects of truth. Remember, Anaka, truth has many aspects. Gandhi's theory has captured some aspects of truth. Don't dismiss Gandhi, for God's sake. And don't own only Ambedkar and socialism. Because truth is not your monopoly, my dear. Please, you weakened the project of truth by subscribing to one aspect of truth as valid truth. You are showing cultural supremacy of your truth over Gandhi's truth. Therefore, I don't subscribe to this narrow-minded thing. Myself, I believe that it's important for us to understand that not a single truth, not a single theory of truth is valid. There are multiple accounts of truth. Some accounts are valid, some accounts are not valid. And these accounts are there in each thinker. Gandhi also presents a similar kind of. Gandhi's account of caste system, critique of caste, may be weak. But Gandhi's account of cultural supremacy is quite, in my view, quite legitimate and very important for us to learn from that. Therefore, in my view, Gandhi is a modern thinker, and there are elements Gandhi which I already underlined, which are deeply relevant for our modernity. But as I said, no theory of modernity is adequate by itself. Gandhi's theory of modernity has its own drawbacks. Ambedkar's theory of modernity has strength over Gandhi. Ambedkar's theory of modernity has its own drawbacks. Socialist theory has some achievement over. Therefore, multiple theories of modernity are required to understand a project. I don't choose a side of one theory against another theory. Bottom to top, yes, that is. Gandhi believes that bottom top approach is relevant everywhere. Today, World Bank is talking about it. Today, World Bank is saying, unless we adopt bottom to top approach, unless we let people participate in unless stakeholders communities are formed across the world, you can't ensure developmental benefits percolating to people. Therefore, people must participate in development process across the world, in Africa, in India, in Southeast Asia, in Latin American countries. They must participate. Therefore, Gandhi's project today has been universalized by none other than the champion of free market economy. Gandhi would not be able to say that idea, but the idea is they have taken Gandhi out. Gandhi's relevance has been proved by World Bank now. Selectively, they are applying the idea to large parts of the world, where bottom to top approach is by and large followed. Stakeholders, communities are formed. Stakeholder associations are active in pursuing development goals in percolating to ordinary people. Though, as I said, there are problems in each of these approaches, and World Bank is doing in a restrictive manner, where market is not developed. They are applying these ideas, but Gandhi would have extended ideas to even market forces. World Bank won't do it. But the point is, Gandhi's idea is relevant, at least partially, for World Bank to apply to those areas where market is weak. They find Gandhi has strength. That proves Gandhi's argument right. So that I've answered decentralized political system, because decentralization for Gandhi can only from below. The decentralized political system across the world, in India especially, has been used as a system that evolves from above. Is state which is trying to decentralize. That's not genuine decentralization. Genuine decentralization of power must come from below, not from above. It is that work which a village community cannot do must be left to the district community to do. That work which district community cannot do must be left to provincial community to do. That work which provincial community cannot do must be left to national community to do. In this sense, decentralized must evolve. Decentralized must evolve from below. Therefore, there is no decentralized. There is a participatory democracy. Gandhi never believed in decentralization. Gandhi, there is of course some confusion in language, but the overall spirit of inquiry, the spirit of thought, in my view, if I understand it rightly, in my view, Gandhi essentially believes in participation of people in development process. To the extent you can do things for your village, do it. Leave the rest to others to do it. That's how the surplus activities required by your village, which you can't do it. Leave it rest. For example, you can't take a high school, take care of primary school. You can take care of a micro hydro project, but let large hydro project go to state or go to provincial state to handle. That kind of thing Gandhi would have expected, but you impose everything on people from above, and then say decentralization. Gandhi would not agree with that. So Gandhi self is universal. Yes, actually, it's both. Self is universal because it is interrelated. Is expanded self. Therefore, it is. He would say every individual is universal. Every individual located universal community and cosmic community. Therefore, that individual self remains incomplete unless it is connected with the cosmic community through the large social units in the world community, the world history, or world civilization. Therefore, Gandhi would say self is universal. But it's universal because it is incomplete in itself. Each self is incomplete in itself, and therefore is interdependent, but never complete by itself. Therefore, it always grows. It's ever expanding, never stops. Expansion of self is always on. It always moves on. Therefore, is ever expanding self. That is critical. Therefore, if I would say self is universal, interrelated, but never perfectly universal, never perfectly interrelated. This is what Gandhi's notion of imperfect truth. The idea of every account of truth is imperfect. Is also every account of individual self is imperfect. Every account of national self is imperfect. Every account of world community is imperfect. Every account of cosmic community remains imperfect. And they must get connected with each other, yet they remain imperfect. The whole account will remain imperfect. It's important for you to realize that what you achieve today as universal and interrelated could be challenged by your preceding generation, challenged by your succeeding generation. They may come out with a new idea of universal, they may come out with a new idea of interrelatedness. Therefore, be prepared to listen to them. This is what Gandhi's doctrine of Anekantavad argues for. That principle I apply to the idea of self as well. So, no account of truth can be subscribed as holistic truth. That's very important. Every account of truth is valid by itself. It has also impure elements. Therefore, it is important for us to overcome it by staying in connection with each other, staying in touch with each other, staying in a mood to learn from each other. And we improvise. As we improvise ourselves, our improved knowledge will also remain imperfect. Therefore, leave it to next generation to improvise it further. That's the important goal of Gandhian project. Ever expanding circle basically means that. Therefore, you might have accomplished some aspects of circle today, but leave the next generation to expand it further. The next generation to expand further. Therefore, over time, the idea of self goes on expanding. So, Gandhi, what is it? Last question, Vrindavan, Gandhi, participatory.
The last question, sir, the last
Material
question
democracy,
is
no?
that, how to, connect the Gandhian participatory democracy with modern
Material
no,
democracy. Yeah.
mobocracy. That's the first.
Oh, democracy. Okay.
Mobocracy.
Yeah.
That's the first question asked by Vrindavan. And the second question is that how to harmonize today's materialistic democracy with Gandhian spiritual democracy.
Now, first you have to criticize material democracy. Where the materialistic democracy has done immense harm to ourselves. The whole civilization is under threat because of the so-called materialist democracy. The important part is to stay connected with nature, and important for it to respect nature. Important, even if you don't worship nature, Gandhi would have worshipped nature. I won't worship, but important for me to respect nature. That I learned from Gandhi. Therefore, the materialistic democracy has weakened the cause of democracy by destroying my existence. By destroying nature, you are destroying my existence. Therefore, my existence is existence as a self is in crisis. I am deeply scared of coming out to public today because of so-called materialist democracy we are pursuing here. Therefore, it is important for us to regenerate the idea of democracy. It's true that material democracy is very important. You can't dismiss materiality of democracy. And Gandhi argues quite clearly it's important for it to address people's needs. Democracy must try to address people's needs. People's needs must be taken care. Therefore, material democracy is important for Gandhi. Gandhi is not saying that material democracy must be dismissed off. Without material democracy, you can't have democracy. Unless you address people's needs, unless you fulfill material needs of people, not material greed of people, you can't have a democracy. Therefore, material need of people must be addressed. At the same time, important for you to develop respect for each other, respect each other's religion, respect nature, respect God, respect religion. If you are atheist, therefore, it is important for you to develop multiple forms of respect, multiple forms of spirituality in your thinking, so that there will be balance between material democracy and spiritual democracy. And Sarvodaya, development of all, is again kind of a spiritual democracy. You must nurture all these values. Then try to address the last mile person, the person who is left behind, must take care of that person when you're trying to do a development project, which has been addressed by John Rawls quite fiercely. Is known for theory of justice, for saying what exactly Gandhi said 30 years back, 30 years before Rawls. It was important for you to understand that Gandhian doctrine is now no more confined to India. It has spread its reach to various parts of the world. It has been able to influence people like Rawls. Rawls talks about Antodaya. If you read Theory of Justice, he talks about Antodaya without using the word Antodaya. He learns this from Gandhi, from Abraham Lincoln, and many people, many moral philosophers. He borrows and then synthesizes them and develops theory of justice. Therefore, it's important for us to understand all these complexities, and therefore that's how Gandhi would be envisaged for us. Participatory democracy to mobocracy, I don't understand this question, but participatory democracy, not mobocracy. Mobocracy means what? Mobocracy means you are trying to destroy democracy. Participatory democracy is not to destroy democracy, it's to expand democracy, to enable people to participate, so that mob-like psychology can be contained. Mob people who are left out by democratic currents, they adopt mobocracy, they can be contained. Gandhi would say mobocracy, for mobocracy you must have a dialogue with them, must engage with them, and don't try to eliminate them, because mobs also represent people. Therefore, Gandhi would adopt passive resistance to mobocracy. Gandhi would argue for dialogue with militant people, and he would like to transform them through dialogic methods, some of which were practiced by people like Lohia, Jayaprakash Narayan. Jayaprakash Narayan adopted similar stance towards mobs of people. He adopted same attitude of dialogue with dacoits. Those who basically dacoits were actually practically mobs of people, though they were underground. Mobocracy may be foreground, maybe in the open field, but Gandhi would have prescribed the model of dialogue, not legal solution to mobocracy. You can't simply coerce people to be free. It's important for you to have a dialogue, persistent dialogue, even if it involves the cost of your life, in order to reason.
Sanjay, please mute.
Uh,
Okay. So thank you, sir. If I will correctly, read the question of Vrindavan, maybe Vrindavan is asking how to defeat the modern mobocracy by, Gandhian participatory democracy. So I think the participatory democracy, the theoretical participatory democracy, is getting reduced in modern days uh, towards a kind of mobocracy. Maybe Vrindavan was hitting to that point. So before I go to the last part of the webinar, that is you know vote of thanks. I think let's take two more questions asked by Pinky Bharadwaj and Suneli Chaudhary. And the question asked by Pinky Bharadwaj is that why Gandhi is used opportunistically and why is he reduced to a historical figure only? And what is your view about the current methods of protesting in India from Gandhian perspective? And the question asked by Suneli Chaudhary is that what is the relevance of Gandhian ideas in the scheme of value education? Sir, please.
First question is what is the question? I forgot.
The first question is that why Gandhi is used opportunistically and why
Okay.
is he reduced to a historical figure only?
Okay. Yeah. Why?
And okay, have you written all these three questions, sir?
Two questions, na? Value of education and opportunistic use of Gandhi.
Okay, please.
So opportunistic use of Gandhi, many opportunistic basically means instrumental use of Gandhi. Many people use Gandhi instrumentally to justify their existence in India. Congress party did that for a long time, and they used Gandhi to justify decentralized democracy. Gandhi never said democracy should decentralize. Gandhi said democracy must evolve from below. And centralized democracy trying to decentralize it, which means democracy evolves from below top again. That is quite contrary to Gandhi's spirit of democracy, which must evolve from below, not from top. Decentralized democracy means what? We are trying to decentralize centralized democracy. We are trying to initiate that from top. Gandhi not subscribed that. They attributed everything to Gandhi. So they basically Indian state has used Gandhi opportunistically to justify its existence, survival, and many rulers have been using Gandhi's opportunistically. They pay lip service to Gandhi because they don't want to enable people of India. They are trying to disable people by using Gandhi. Gandhi has been opportunistically used by many people from left to right. Left for a long time dismissed Gandhi, and the right owned Gandhi and disabled Gandhi. Therefore, real Gandhi is yet to emerge. It is important for us to study Gandhi and emphasize that Gandhi's idea of democracy is not self-government. A centralized state government, self-government, or decentralized self-government is not Gandhi. Gandhi clearly talks about power from below, self-rule, rather than self-government as Swaraj. Equating Swaraj with self-government is trying to degrade Gandhi. Swaraj self-rule basically means rule of self by self. So that's a very important moral principle of Gandhi's democracy, and that points towards a participatory democracy, which today, fortunately, World Bank is applying selectively, where market forces are weak. That indicates Gandhi's idea is still relevant. So, but use opportunistically in one way. World Bank is using Gandhi selectively, where market is weak. They are using idea for power stakeholders' participation in development process, joint forest management project, or women self-help groups, or say parents' participation in school education. They are all various forms of participation. Gandhi's democracy envisaged. And today, where market forces are weak, bank is supporting them across the world. But that is again one way of opportunistic use. We are not extending the participant democracy to even those forces where market forces are guiding and dominating. Therefore, you are using one kind of opportunistic use of Gandhi. So it's important for us to. It's not that Gandhi simply raised a historical figure. Gandhi's ideas are all being applied by this opportunistic character. Remember, when you are using Gandhi instrumentally, you are using anyway. But you are using selectively, applying it to selective areas. You are not applying Gandhi to those areas where your comfort zone is going to be hit. You are applying Gandhi to those areas which are beyond your comfort zone. Therefore, in a way, there is acknowledgement of Gandhi's application to real life. Even the opportunistic use of Gandhi indicates that Gandhi's ideas are made applicable in real life. Therefore, they are still relevant. Therefore, the relevance of Gandhi is quite experienced by people who are involved in policy making, policy implementation across the world. Therefore, I don't think Gandhi is a historical figure. Gandhi is a living figure with us. He is living with us through World Bank, through Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, through many slogans raised by our national leaders. What do they indicate? They indicate that the idea of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas raised by Prime Minister indicates Sarvodaya of Gandhi is still relevant for him.
Then Swachh Bharat.
Swachh Bharat is still relevant for him. Therefore, Gandhi's ideas Gandhi is not simply a historical figure. He's a live figure. He's a figure which is, you must remember, because of COVID-19. Don't reduce Gandhi to history. Gandhi is deeply relevant because COVID-19 is not a part of history. It will come in the form of COVID-23. Be aware of it. And don't forget Gandhi then. The oxygen will be short, so don't forget Gandhi. Therefore, it's important for Gandhi, don't reduce Gandhi to historical figure. Gandhi can never be reduced to historical figure. People of the world will remember Gandhi. Martin Luther Jr. remembers Gandhi. And Gandhi's dialogue is remembered by Martin Luther Jr. Therefore, it's important for us to remember that Gandhi's ideas are deeply relevant, and world communities across Sri Lankan leaders, American leaders, civil rights leaders, Indian leaders, they remember Gandhi. And people of Sangli district recalled Gandhi and experimented with a microhydral project. Therefore, Gandhi is not a historical figure. Gandhi is a living figure, living without time. But as I said, as you all said, Gandhi has been used opportunistically by several forces of the world. People of India, some people of India, Sangli people, have used Gandhi genuinely, but their efforts are restricted to Sangli district or some villages of Sangli. Therefore, people are fighting for Gandhian ideals. People are trying to experience that. So that is part of life. You have to, unless you struggle for truth, truth will not be accessible on your palm. You have to fight for truth. You have to struggle for truth. Then only accomplish truth. But when you accomplish truth, remember that you are not mastering truth. You only master some aspects of truth. This is what lesson you learn from Mahatma Gandhi. If you don't want to reduce Gandhi to historical figure, learn this very important lesson for your own life from Mahatma Gandhi.
So thank you, sir. I think you have taken numerous questions. So if some of the questions are left, I think you search the answer from your within. I think you know that answer. Just you have to speak it so that again you will realize it. So I think right now I request my MPhil student Sanjay Meher to give vote of thanks to our guests. So Sanjay, please.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, all and one present here. Respected and most important distinguished chief guest of today's webinar, Professor Sanjeev Mittal, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sambalpur University, respected resource person, keynote speaker, Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik, sir. Now he is Dean of School of Social Science, Hyderabad Central University, and respected convener of today's webinar, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, sir, all the faculties of the department, and all the dignitaries present in the webinar. I am Sanjay Meher, Research Scholar of the department. On behalf of the PG Department of Political Science and Public Administration and its entire fraternity, feel immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this webinar a very resounding success. First of all, I would like to give my hearty thanks to our chief guest, Professor Sanjeev Mittal sir, for gracing today's webinar. Thank you, sir. Then I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our resource person, Professor Patnaik sir, for making an excellent presentation and making this webinar a very meaningful and thought-provoking. Sir has rightly stressed and basically talked about 5 things. First one is the concept of oceanic circles. This is an idea which moves from each person's starting from regional community to the world community and the ultimately to the cosmic community or to the heavenly body. Secondly, he talked about critique of Western civilizations. Gandhiji basically stood for technological justice, as he said. And thirdly, he talked about critique of liberal state. Fourthly, he talked about critique of religious supremacy as India is a multi-religious society. And finally, in his key point, he talked about Satyagraha as a model of conflict resolutions. Satyagraha means speaking of unpleasant truth. Thank you very much, sir, for your deliberation and enlighten us from your knowledge. So then I would further extend the hearty thanks to our head of the department, Dr. Satyaprakash Das, sir, for his guidance and inspirations. And I would especially thanks to the conveners of this webinar, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, sir, who on the auspicious occasion of Gandhi Jayanti and Shastri Jayanti organized this webinar and made this day so meaningful. Thank you, sir, for being a guiding force and for being a guiding force for every new step forward. So then I am happy to express my vote of thanks to all the faculties of our department, especially to Dr. Rajat Kumar Khujur sir for coordinating this webinar and all the faculties member that has made this webinar a grand success through their deliberation. My deep sense of thanks and appreciation goes to all the participants who were live with us and attended this webinar with great enthusiasm, made today's event a great success. In the end, I would like to thank you all for being with us today. Thank you all. Have a great day.
So thank you, Sanjay. I think I'm also thankful to you because not only you gave the vote of thanks, for today's webinar also Sanjay acted as a technical person. Without him, I could not be in a position to do this webinar. So thank you, one and all. And lastly, okay, you remember Gandhi, you remember Gandhian values, and try to find solutions from Gandhi. And if possible, I let's see that movie Munna Bhai. Is that movie Lage Raho Munna Bhai, right?
Yeah.
Lage Raho Munna Bhai. I think that movie, it provides a very strong message, the contemporary, relevance of Gandhi, right? So thank you very much. Now, Sanjay, you can end the recording, but you continue the meeting. You can have personal chat with Patnaik sir. You
Yes,
end
sir.
the recording, please.
Okay, sir.